Hello and welcome to another episode of the Data and AI podcast. My name is Lloyd Dunstall. I'm a principal recruitment consultant here at Harnham, leading our digital analytics contract desk. This is my second time hosting the podcast, and I'm very excited to be joined by Abi Hough, a consultant who has been in the industry for some 20 years, working on all things optimisation, but with a specific focus on the most important piece of the puzzle that sometimes gets forgotten about, the users. We are going to be exploring the limitations of using data in business decisions and why it's important to go beyond the numbers to gain real insights. Abi, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Lloyd. How are you doing?
Yes, very good, thanks. Very good. Pleasure to speak with you. So I think a good place to start is the beginnings. And I think it would be good if you could talk us through your background and how you got into this space.
Yeah, okay. Are you ready for a story?
Yes.
Because I'm quite old now, so it's quite a lot of story, a few chapters. So I went to Aberystwyth University and I studied computer science all the way back in 1998. Yes, previous century, that's how old I am. And at the time when I was at university, I don't know, the internet was a new thing. Nobody was really using it unless you were a proper geeky, nerdy type. You know, it just wasn't there. And when I was doing my course, I wasn't a programmer, and the course was heavily focused on programming and hardware and databases, all the proper stuff you'd expect with a computer science degree back then. But there was one module in the entire course that was about usability. Just one.
Right.
And it was the only module that I paid any attention to, if I'm being honest with you. It was like, I enjoy this because I wasn't the best programmer, if I'm honest. And the idea of looking at how humans interacted with computers seemed far more appealing to me. Anyway, so I wrote my dissertation, and it was about human-computer interactions and accessibility in the year 2001 or whatever it was by the time I had to do my dissertation. And I got really good feedback from it from all of my lecturers, because they hadn't really contemplated that side of it either. You know, if the internet was coming along, you know, how are people actually going to use it? So that's where the initial kind of like, oh yeah, I quite like this kind of work. And then I left Aberystwyth. I grew my wings and I went to London, like everybody does, because that's apparently what you're supposed to do when you graduate. And I ended up working as a front-end developer, not hardcore coding, but working on the front end of websites and doing the design work and then building that out. Did that for a few years and eventually ended up at a company called Love Film. And I don't know if anybody listening will remember who
I remember.
Love Film are.
It's a subscription, wasn't it?
It was a subscription. They had a website. You went on there, you chose whatever DVDs that you wanted to hire. So a bit Blockbuster-esque, but online version.
And it was delivered to you then, wasn't it?
And it was posted to you, through a letterbox. I only get junk through my letterbox now, so it's not really very exciting. So I was working with them, and I was doing the front end and the design work. And as part of that, we did some user testing. Right, which back in 2004 was quite forward thinking, I suppose, to have people come in and, you know, record them using your website. And it was completely eye-opening to me because I thought I was doing a really good job. Turns out, apparently I wasn't, because I thought I had built something super and really easy to use and everybody loved it. And it appears that I was in my own echo chamber because it was literally me building and designing it, and I wasn't really thinking about anybody else. So, you know, I'm watching these session recordings of these people using the website, literally not crying, but definitely banging my head on the desk thinking, why don't they get it? You know, it's so straight. I understand this. Everybody in the office understands this, but you have people in the wild who are using the website and they've got no clue how to do anything. So that was kind of my first proper sort of adventure into understanding users more and how they interact with the websites that we do. But I guess that was more of a usability side of things rather than digging into who these people actually were. So that's kind of went from uni to that. And then I've done many, many jobs in the meantime, which all ultimately ended up with being involved in optimization and A/B testing. Again, from the outset of that being a thing. So many, many years doing that kind of work. And over that time, it's gone from what I would perceive now as almost black hat kind of principles to that approach to the work. And the people that are doing it properly now have kind of realised there's more to it than quick fixes. We'll stick a countdown banner on there, or all of this kind of nasty crap that nobody really wants to see these days. And the companies that are doing it well have actually taken a step back and thought, hang on a minute, we can do all of that work, that's okay, but there has to be more to it, and there needs to be more to it, because there's an increasing cost in getting people onto your website in the first place. It costs money to buy people in, I suppose. Some of the price per persons that I've seen are quite eye-watering, if I'm being honest. So they've kind of gone through the phases like, we've got to get all of these people in, but then they went through the era of, get loads of people, then we don't care about them anymore. They can go and do whatever they want. We're not bothered about retention. And I think with all of the increase in costs and stuff, people are now going, actually, it'd be really great if we could keep these people for longer once we finally got them onto the website. That would be amazing, And I guess that's what my thing is about now, is understanding the people that we have on the website and how we keep them there for longer. And actually, that's quite in-depth work, and it's not numbers work. It's properly understanding people and who they are. So it's more anthropological, for wanting to use an archaic term, I suppose, in this era of data and science. I'm going back to a time where we take the time to understand who these people are in order to keep them for longer. And I guess that's kind of where my focus is and where I enjoy doing the work, because I can see real results from it. And it's a little bit different from a lot of the approaches that we see these days, which I know we're going to talk about today, but being very data focused on everything. And my argument, or my soapbox moment, is that yes, data is helpful towards making decisions, but it's not the be all and end all as to what those decisions should ultimately be. There has to be more humanity behind the choices we're making, really. So there you go. That's how I kind of got into what I'm doing.
I think it sounds interesting. I think as well, like you're saying, you can only tell so much, can't you, from the data about who your customers are. Like, there's more to the story than just that aspect of it. And you'll never have a good grasp of your customer unless you understand them fully, right?
You've got to look behind the numbers, right? It's crucial. I think that you can make many, many bad decisions if you base it solely on data, because data is only as reliable as the quality that you're getting in. So, I don't know if we can swear on this podcast, but, shit in is shit out, right? Basically, if you haven't got that quality of data there in the first instance, and from my experience, many times, it's really poor quality data, and people are just making decisions based on that. So they're making the wrong decisions and then wondering why it's all gone a bit wrong. And the same applies for when you're A/B testing as well. Many companies are making decisions based on A/B test results, but the data isn't valid to be making those decisions on. So, and you can apply it to, if you're looking at your analytics and you're thinking, well, I need to do a marketing campaign to X, Y, and Z. But again, if that data is not correct, you're making the wrong decisions and spending money where you don't need to do. So I think the ideal sweet spot is to have an understanding that, yes, we have data, but how good is it to start off with? And how do we cross-reference that back to the business goals and the people that we're trying to sell to, or get them to sign up the form or buy a service, whatever it might be. So I want people to just have it forefront of mind that it's not just data.
And I think that would bring us on to my next question, really, which would be to kind of explore your views on data and then the value of collaborating with numbers, so with the data, but how then an over-reliance on data can lead us to miss, the human story, and, why it's important to combine the both rather than relying solely on the data.
Okay, so I'll give you more of my backstory now. I might sound like I'm a complete, I just hate data. That isn't the case at all. There's a genuine reason why I looked beyond just data when I'm doing the work that I'm doing. And you've heard of dyslexia, which is reading, writing, issues with that. Well, I have the number version of that, which is dyscalculia. So
Right.
numbers to me look like alphabet-y spaghetti, but in numeric form, right? There's something there that my brain is just like... it means I don't know what's going on here. So I've always, for that reason, kind of had an aversion for just data, because my brain don't work in a way where I can solely rely on that to make a decision, because I don't know if it's the right one. So in terms of if I'm talking to people who are really good at dealing with data, my question to them is that's brilliant, but can you make it, can you explain it in a way that a 2-year-old would get what you're saying? Because that's the way that I need it sort of translated to me in a way that I can understand. So, one of my biggest things that I'm looking for because I work with people who are great with data, right? It's the only way that I can function. One of the first things that I'm looking for is great to have somebody who's a brilliant analyst, but how well can they translate that to somebody like me? Because ultimately, when you think about a whole business as a whole, you're dealing with all sorts of people. And whilst you may be an analyst and very comfortable with numbers and data, and you can have a spreadsheet and be a bit like something out of the Matrix where you can see through the code. Oftentimes people, including the people that are making the key stakeholders, C-suite and stuff like that, yes, they might have financial acumen, for example, but when it comes to the kind of data sets that we're talking about, you really have to explain it in a way that they get it, right? In the context of their reality that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, they understand the story behind that data. So I guess that was the first sort of why I don't like data so much, just because I have an issue, which means I can't understand it as well as the other people might, for example. But I think, that's the first part. So what was the second part of the question that you asked?
So I think it would be good to know how you then collaborate with the data side of it, because you're obviously then bringing a new angle, right, and different insights to the picture, and how you combine that, and then also how sometimes an over reliance on data can miss the human story.
So for me, it's all about triangulating various different aspects of, if you want to call it, evidence, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. A client might come along to me and they ask for an optimization audit on their website. From my point of view, the first things that I need to be able to perform that audit is to speak to the analytics person and, get them to interrogate the data. So there's a couple of things that I would need to know. Where is all the traffic coming from? Okay, where do they land? Where do they bounce? And most importantly, what are they visiting the website on? Which devices, which browsers, which operating systems? And out of all of those, which ones are doing well at converting, whatever the metric might be that we're measuring against? How well are they doing? Are there ones that are doing really well? And if they're doing really well, are they genuinely doing really well, or is there something funky going on in the data? And the same for the ones that aren't doing very well. So, for example, if you've got loads and loads of mobile traffic, but the conversion rate is quite low, I need to understand the reasons behind why those rates are remarkably low, because when I look at that, I'm thinking there's an opportunity there, right? Mm-hmm. If you have all of the traffic on mobile, but the conversion rate's really low, then we should be focusing on the mobile experience, because that's where the golden goose might be, for example, that one thing that we are looking for to increase those conversion rates. So it's really important that I can speak to an analyst in the way that I speak, not technically. It's just like, I have a bunch of questions, can you answer them in plain English? And they can go away and do that. So being able to communicate with an analyst in that way, from my point of view, is super important to get those answers to the questions that I need with regarding to an audit. And then when I go away and do the audit and I come out with hundreds and hundreds of potential usability issues, optimization issues, accessibility issues, whatever it might be, I then need to triangulate what I found by interrogating the data further. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if there is something particularly funky on the checkout, on the form, whatever it might be that is flagged as a usability issue, ideally, I need to go back to the analyst and say, okay, so I found this. Is there anything in the data that backs this up?
I see.
And if there is something in the data that backs this up, let's put a monetary value to it. So, if we can fix that problem, how much is that worth to the company? Because if I'm being honest with you, usability and user research and stuff like that, it often gets put on the back burner because there's no easy way to define how much that is worth, right?
I see, yeah.
So if you can go into stakeholders with a financial figure about what you think the potential fix for this might be and what you might get from it, you're more likely to get the backing to get the work put into whatever work stack there is. So always thinking along those ways. So look at the data, find the issues, put a value against it, put it forward for, some stuff is just an immediate fix. You just have to fix it. But then also justifying the cost of going down the A/B testing route, because it costs money to do an A/B test, right? If you think about how much work goes into that, plus there's a risk factor, then you sadly need the financials behind it to justify the work in the first place. And there's not just from an audit point of view, but then in terms of the user research that I do as well, there's lots of insights that you can get from the data beyond just like, 50% of our people are female and 50% beyond that normal bog standard stuff that we do.
Yeah.
If I carry out a lot of user research, I will go back to an analyst with the same sort of questions. So, what is there in the data that justifies what I found from my user research? It's a communication and a conversation between both parties, really. But the easiest way of being able to do that is just by having plain language conversations and having that information fed back in a way that answers the question in a very simple way so people can get the gist of it, I suppose.
I see. How do you go about completing your user research and your usability research and stuff like that? How do you do that?
Well, lots of different ways, really. The usual stuff, running surveys, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
User interviews as well, especially if you can identify within your user group particular segments that are not doing so well on the website for whatever particular reasons. That's always quite interesting to drill it down.
I see.
In that way. But I don't just do spreadsheets and numbers. I like to get out there and meet people and talk to the people that are using the product that they're buying. There's a lot to be said for people watching. And like I said earlier, this sort of more anthropological approach towards understanding who these users are. So it really is observing people in the wild and figuring out what they do. I mean, I've been to garden centres and watched people choose plants, and I've been into like curries. There are other retailers out there, just to say, and just watching, listening to what people are saying when they're choosing a washing machine or a hairdryer, or, I don't know, a vacuum, whatever it might be. What are the questions that they're asking on the ground that potentially you're not asking on your you're not telling them the answers to on their website, right? Because that's probably why you didn't get the conversion, because they couldn't get the answer. Whereas in a store, you have people on the floor who are helping customers, and listening to those conversations is super, super interesting, because if you have a person who sells TVs day in and day out, right, that's their job, you're pretty sure they're going to be a font of all knowledge on that. And to go into a store and get an answer to your question within about 3 seconds of being in there, because you know what they're like when they apply you up for a set. It's like, yeah, that one looks good. I'm going to go and see if they need any help. But that's almost what I'm trying to do, is to replicate that experience, but on the website, because it's very easy on a website to just do your usual thing. Here's a photo, brief description. Oh, I tell you what, we're going to hide all that really helpful information that somebody might ask another human in a shop elsewhere on the page that nobody can find. And then we wonder why people aren't adding to basket. Yeah, I enjoy going out and speaking and having candid conversations with people. I don't do it in the guise of a user researcher. It's more like a secret shopper kind of thing. So people have no idea why I'm there. I might be buying a TV, or that's what they think I'm doing, or whatever it is that I'm trying to research, but they have no clue. And that's the whole key of it, because if you want to take an anthropological approach, then the idea is people have no idea that you're really there beyond any other purpose of just being present. So That's kind of what I like to do, and it's reaped some really good results for my clients just by taking that step away from the computer and going out experiencing the rest of humanity, because actually we're quite interesting.
Yeah, I think it's like there's limitations, right, to just using the data from the website, because you're missing out on maybe the customers that didn't visit the website but have gone to the store and things like that, who are also customers of that business. The companies might be missing a trick if they don't do the approach that you take as well.
They are missing a trick. I've discovered people like talking to other humans, right? We're in another pandemic, if you like, online at the moment, where you can't speak to a human when you're making a purchase, right? There's no customer service numbers anywhere. If you try the chat help, it's some crazy ass bot that you've got to try and, it never gives you the answer that you want. And you end up, typing in, I want to speak to a human. It's like, I think I can still help you with these 5 other questions that are completely irrelevant. It's enough to put anybody off. I'll give you a good example of this, actually. So recently I have, after 20 plus years of being a customer, I've had enough. And the idea, because I have my phone that I manage, my son's phone that I manage, my dad's phone that I manage, right? And the idea of flipping all 3 over to a new provider was just like soul destroying. It's like, I can't do it, which is why they've had me for a customer for so long. The idea of going through that alone on a website to try and do it, to switch to a new provider, I couldn't face it. Anyway, I finally got the guts up to do it just a couple of weeks ago. And I swapped to EE, right? And I looked at their website. I thought, I have no idea where to start on this website to do what I need to do. Add in the complication of having 2 Apple Watches which need the SIM synced up with the phone. I was just like, I don't know how to do this. And I was this close to going, well, sod it, I'll just stay because I can't be bothered. But I decided to ring the customer service, right? And I got put through to a human. And you know what? Within 15 minutes, the entire thing was done. Whereas I would have spent 2 hours on that website trying to figure out what to do, trying to negotiate FAQs that weren't helping me, trying to talk to a chatbot, which was like as much use as a chocolate teapot. But actually, I managed to speak to a human. And because of that, he got the business, right? And it's not an insubstantial amount of money every month. But as soon as I got to speak to a human, they were like, yeah, you're dead to me now. And I have to say, there was a slight issue with the Apple Watch not working. But again, I rang them up and within 5 minutes, it was solved.
Yeah.
And this is what we're missing with everything being so online and with companies thinking, well, we'll get AI to do all that customer service stuff. It doesn't matter. Actually, you're running the risk of alienating your customers even more. And my argument is that unless companies start to realise or understand and appreciate that they're dealing with humans and humans are messy, and there are some things that people just need to remember that the people that are paying their salaries are also humans. So to take a step back and remember that, okay, well, maybe I'd like to treat my users a bit like I would like to be treated myself, rather than just solely relying on what I perceive as still quick fixes and not necessarily the answers. We chase cost efficiencies far too fast without thinking about the implications further down the line. Because for this financial year, we can cull 20 customer service jobs because we replace it with AI. Well, yes, you've made the saving of 20 salaries for a customer service person, but ultimately, in the long run, how much money have you lost because your customers just want to speak to somebody?
Yeah.
And they want to speak to somebody because you don't understand them well enough to be able to give them the information that they need on their website. It's
Definitely.
simple.
I completely agree as well. I've been there, the frustrations of needing to get something done and not being able to speak to somebody, particularly if it's something important or something something that's important to me. I want to speak to a person rather than finding the answer from an FAQ or off a chatbot, and it is important. I guess on that as well, there might be exclusion as well for people that don't want to use computers or can't, and all of this side of it as well. And so,
do you want another example of that? I can get on my soapbox again. So I don't know how many of the listeners have had to, in some way, interact with the NHS recently, right? I remember a time where you could ring your doctor, make an appointment, and good Lord, you could even go in and make an appointment in reception, right? And you get to see your doctor. Now, the whole process is completely different. You have to have an app. And there's like 10 different types of apps that you have to use in order to be able to just make an appointment to see your doctor. And the best thing about my doctor is even you have to fill in a form, all your details. And one of the questions is, how would you like us to help you today? It's like, it's the same answer every time. I want you to fix my problem. I don't know how you're going to do that. I just want you to fix my problem. What a stupid brilliant question to ask. Anyway, the whole point of me getting very angry about this is my dad is 78 years old, right? He can barely use an iPhone or a computer. He can't navigate all of this onlineness and, we're going digital and no, you can't have a paper prescription anymore because, we're saving the trees, whatever. This has made my dad's life intrinsically more difficult, and including mine, right? Because now I've got to manage his online health stuff because he isn't capable of doing it. So that is bad from a number of reasons in terms of, okay, so what about everybody else who's in this demographic who've got no idea how to do this? No idea how to do any of it. It's excluding them from one of the pride of the UK, the NHS. I know it's going through a rough time at the moment, but, it's something that they have paid for through their taxes. They should be able to access it without feeling this is too much trouble. Because people of that age, people of my age, if you start thinking in terms of your own health, like, I can't face doing that, again, ultimately the cost is even more for the NHS, right? So if I'm sat on a problem that's brewing, whereas, for 6 months and turns out to be something horrible because I couldn't face getting an appointment with the doctor because of the way that I have to do it now, whereas if I'd have been able to just walk in, make an appointment, ring up, whatever it was, and have that problem diagnosed 6 months earlier, the cost to the NHS would have been significantly less.
Yeah.
So it's kind of broad. So we're in this race to do everything online, but we are leaving people behind, is my point that I'm making. And that's because nobody's stopping to think, hang on a minute, what about these people? And it's not like they don't have the data either. That's the sad thing. They've probably got so much data, they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But nobody's taken a step back and actually thought of it out of the context of that data in terms of the human impact on the changes that they are making. I think I summarised that quite well. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems as well that there's like a short-termism as well, like with, okay, so we can cut costs by reducing the human interaction aspect and make it go all online. However, the longer term, whether that's a telco client losing a customer or the NHS and a potential patient,
somebody's dying.
Yeah, their health deteriorating because they can't see someone quick enough because they've had to go via the online route rather than just being able to go to a GP. It's actually costing money in the longer term.
Yeah. And this is the problem we have. Everybody has got blinkers on that only looks towards the next 3 months, the next 6 months. Nobody's taken a longitudinal view on the overall impact over a longer period of time. And that's where really understanding who you're dealing with starts to pay dividends, because you can then start to predict the things that you need to account for and the impact of the decisions that you're making if you really understand who it is that you're dealing with properly, not just numbers.
And like you say, the data will be there, wouldn't it? To say, right, if we get rid of our customer care centre or customer centre for phone calls and things, right, we'll save, like you say, 20 salaries per year. However, the data will show that you'll lose X amount of customers, which in the long run will cost you X amount of money. So, like, what's the solution? I guess this is where you come in and with your user research and usability and try and persuade them not to do so.
Yes, I think so. I have to say it is a battle. I don't think it's a bigger battle to sell this in than the current amount of firefighting that I see going on in various companies. It's like that famous meme where that dog's sat in a room that's on fire and everything's fine. Do you know what I mean? It feels a bit like that, and that isn't a unique feeling I get for just one particular company or however. It's a universal thing that I'm seeing, and I think as humans, we have fight or flight mode, right? And everybody's in flight mode. They're just like, we don't know what we're doing. And it's all so crazy. And I can understand that because there are so many pressures for people to perform in their jobs for profit, whatever it might be. You have to spend like 5 minutes on LinkedIn to understand that everybody in that professional space is basically going crazy, right? Because nobody knows what's going on. Everything is changing so fast, which is why I think we probably need to just take a minute and take a step back from it and get back to what we're really doing. And I know we had a brief chat about this before we started, and the question came up: what would happen if all your data was taken away? I don't know, there was some massive cloud storage outage or whatever, but imagine a world where you didn't have the data to make the decisions that you think you need to make. What would you do instead? And I guess that's where I say, well, you're going to have to go out there and find the information, aren't you? And that's kind of what the approach that I take, is going out and listening to people and speaking to people. And it's a soft skill that I think has been lost. It's completely lost because everybody is so reliant on the data all the time. We talk to the data all the time, but we're losing the ability to talk to the people that we're dealing with, whether it's your customers or whether it's your work colleagues, your friends, your family, anything like that. And I'm guilty of it. My son will be upstairs and I'll be literally text messaging him, like, can you come down for dinner? Rather than talking to him. It's like, are you ready for dinner? So we're all guilty of it. I think we're missing out on so much that speaking to people can give a company, because you can speak to one person and all of a sudden you'll have this sort of aha moment, right? It's just like, God, I never thought of it in that way before. And that one thing might be the pivotal moment where that company can make a decision and go, you know what? We completely messed up. We've completely missed the point. We've missed a potential opportunity because nobody's taken a human view on it, right? They're not getting other human views on what they're trying to do. And those conversations are so important for collaborating with people, to be able to spar off people, right? And get ideas generated. And whether that's your colleagues or your users, whoever it might be, just by having that genuine human connection where you're actually interested in what people are struggling with, why they came to you in the first place, what's the reason they are there. All of that is a complete gold mine in terms of improving a product or a website, whatever it might be. It is more of a gold mine than staring at GA and going, what's these numbers telling me? Because they're not telling you the human side behind those numbers, right? They are very binary.
Absolutely.
And humans aren't binary. We all know, if we're honest, we're all a bit of a mess. Right?
And unpredictable as well. And
yes, exactly that. And you look at data and it's like, oh yes, I can see the trends, blah 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 blah. But if you zoom in, they're not really trends at all, right? It's maybe a very poor reflection on human behaviour, right? I mean, if I go and buy something, I'm not sat at the computer with the dedicated task of buying something. Invariably, I'm on my phone and I'm cooking dinner, and then I get distracted, and then something else happens in the house, like the dog's thrown up, or I don't know, Milo spilled a cup of drink all over the stairs, which is quite common. So, you can't define that human behaviour in the numbers, right? Because I'm going to check out with the thing that I'm buying. I'm just not going to do it right now. I might do it in 4 weeks' time, right? And if you're not looking at that window beyond I'm a lost conversion, right? I'm not. I'm just a human, and I'm trying to do 1,000,010 things all at once, and stuff gets in the way. So by thinking about your users in the way that you should think about yourself, right? Why am I on this planet? What am I doing? Why am I here? What issue am I dealing with today? Sort of thinking about it from that point of view might give you more of an understanding behind that data and the stuff that you are potentially seeing. So if you can use that, a human approach, and really dive into who your users are at the same point, you get a nice sort of song, if you want. Not talking about death metal, that would be a bit... But you get a good melody, and you start to feel the kind of heartbeat of why people are there in the first place. So that's the point I'm trying to get people to have a think about, really.
Definitely. And I think it's really important, right? And I guess what would be good would be if you have any examples you could share where you've worked with a specific client, maybe that they were just over focusing or over relying on their data, and you brought, the more human approach to it to find out more about their users and how that has then benefited that particular client.
Yeah, so I can't name specifics or anything like that. Good old
No
NDA.
problem.
I've got NDAs coming out of my backside, honestly. So there was one client, well, you know the story, you've heard the talk, right? So they sold a particular type of plant, let's say. Anyway, they were doing really quite well in terms of sales and all that kind of stuff, but they didn't really know who they were selling these plants to. They had no idea.
Yeah.
From just looking at the data. So this is my garden centre story. So they employed me to find out who these people we were dealing with. And it turns out, after going to lots and lots of garden centres all the way around Oxfordshire, there was one very apparent pattern, and that was that most of the users were of an older disposition, shall we say. So boomers. It was a bunch of boomers. That's who they were. So sort of born from 1964. I can't remember the other date off the top of my head. Anyway, sort of late 60s.
Yeah.
And moving on. And they were wondering why the conversions on the website weren't that particularly great. They were fine, but we knew that they could be a lot better. So after doing this kind of user research in person, it was at that point, like we were talking before, that I kind of flicked over to the analyst people and said, well, I've spotted this pattern. Is there anything that you can, backs this up or whatever? And of course there was the usual GA data, but it also turned out these people do mail shot, like actual physical mail shots that go to people's letterboxes and stuff. And they had a whole heap of information about the demographic that these mail shots went out, which was really interesting for me because I'd not really seen a data set like that. I mean, it's like proper old school news stuff coming back. It's just like, I haven't seen a spreadsheet like that for years. But it was data, right? And we looked at all of this data and realised that it wasn't just that everybody in Oxfordshire is really old, but generally who they're dealing with is a much older demographic. So then, of course, I start to audit the website and I realised built for old people using websites.
I see.
Really small fonts and difficult filtering, and checkout was massively confusing, and they kind of had shop pay on there, and these old people had no idea what shop pay was. So, they had apparently at some point signed up for shop pay, didn't realise they were doing it. So when they were trying to check out on the website, they were wondering why they were getting verification codes to their phones and stuff. I really, really didn't like it. So there's loads of things that we A/B tested on the website that helped towards the usability, the accessibility, sorting out this checkout issue and stuff like that. So that's a really good example of where me going out into the wild, not just because I fancied a day trip, because I was genuinely interested in who I was dealing with, and then relating that back to the data that we had. So, more digital analytics, and then all of this old school data that they'd been harvesting for years and never really done anything with, and then making changes on the website, which meant the older people that were coming along to the website, they could actually use it.
Yeah.
So that was a brilliant example of the sort of work and how it can improve, revenue. And it also increased the retention as well, because they found that the old people, they didn't need to go to the garden centre because they could use a website.
Yeah.
So revenue goes up because buying on a website is actually, I'll be fair, it's a bit easier in the middle of winter.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a novelty as well, I guess. Then.
Yeah, exactly. And we very much focused on the desktop and tablet side of it because that's the preferred method for this older generation to shop on, not mobiles.
Not on the phone. Yeah.
No, but it's not all about real person going out and doing stuff. So as part of this, I came up with this new thing, which is, I'm going to say it now, it's called Digital Socio-Cultural Anthropology, which we're going to call DISCO because that's easy.
Yeah.
But what that is basically, instead of going out to the garden centre, yes, you should still meet people and see what they're doing. But for those of us who like digital as well, you can apply this anthropological approach to digital communities. So you go in and you join them all and you do your observations, right? You're just looking at what people are saying. What are they struggling with? What don't they understand? X, Y, and Z. So you can still do the kind of approach that I'm talking about in a digital format as well. You just Reddit, communities, all of this kind of stuff. Just go and join them. And maybe that would be a better way for people who very much like data and being, online, doing their work. You don't go outside. I've got a child like that. He's like a tiny vampire. We call him Casper. But for people where that is their comfort zone, right? So, there is a way that they can dip a toe into this kind of work that I'm talking about, where you get to understand these people slightly better. And yes, you have to account for, the extremes that you might get in online communities, because there's always a couple. But you can get a much better understanding of who these people are and the things that they're struggling with, that then you can go away and go, well, I think we need to fix this problem or that problem. So, yeah, there you go. And solution for everybody.
Yeah, I was literally about to say everybody wins, don't they? Because the customer has a better experience, the client, the business gets more revenue because the customer is happier, they'll spend more money, they'll be more loyal.
For longer.
Yeah, the retention, everything. And they get a much better service as well, then the customer will get a better service. So everybody essentially wins.
Everybody's happy, yeah. And it's really about, if you can understand who's going to be interested in what you're selling, why they're interested in it, all of this kind of background information, then you can start really targeting the people that you want on your website or using your product, rather than just having this scattergun approach where we're just going to advertise to everybody. It does on every kind of platform you can think of. Instead of doing that, you save money because you know who your target audience genuinely is and how to speak to them in a way that's going to resonate. So there are many, many plus sides to doing that. I just wish more people would.
Absolutely. And I think the most successful businesses are always the ones that understand their customer the best. They have the most usable website or app, and so that as a customer then it's easy to navigate, quick to use, and there's no hassle.
It is about all of those things, but the pinnacle key to all of it is resonating with people. I'm going to give you another example because it's very relevant to this week. So back in 2006, I decided to take a sabbatical off work, right? And during my entire 2006, I played a lot of a computer game called Oblivion. I don't know if anybody has heard of it, but it's a role player game where you're walking around and you can be a magician or a warrior, whatever you might want to be. I mean, I was totally rubbish at the game. I did finish it, but I just liked going around picking flowers and making potions, right? That's just me. Anyway, this was back in 2006. What do I accidentally stumble upon this week? An announcement from the game studio, which I think was Bethesda, that they have remastered this game, right?
Yeah.
And they are releasing it, like they released it yesterday or something. Now, bearing in mind, 2006 to 2020, 20 odd years, right? I hadn't played this game, right? No sooner had I seen the remastered reveal video on YouTube, I had made the decision that I was going to buy this game because I enjoyed it so much. It is stuck in my heart forever. And I'm not a gamer, right? SimCity, Sims, that's about my limit. But this game really stuck with me. So I thought, that's it, I'm going to buy it. Anyway, go to buy it. So, well, okay, I haven't bought a new Xbox since 2006. So now I need to buy a new Xbox to play the game.
Upsell.
Yeah, exactly that. But it didn't take me less than 10 seconds to make the decision that I was going to buy the Xbox, I was going to buy the game, and I might take another sabbatical and just spend a year joking. That is the crux of resonance, where you get a user to make a, not an insubstantial purchase, I might add.
Yeah.
I did have to have a discussion with the other half. Good job, it's my birthday coming up. But that is true resonance, where somebody doesn't even need to think for an instant. That's the action they're going to do. And watching this video from the game makers, I can understand that, because they've really kept the game to what it was originally, right? Yes, they've made it look very nice with a decent engine in there, and the rendering is brilliant, but the core of the game and the story and all of that, they have kept it true to the original. And even when I looked at the video, there was like over 1 million people watching this live announcement, right? And that to me speaks volumes, because when you get the recipe right to really create the resonance, which you can only do when you really understand who you're dealing with and building those relationships with those people, then the rest of it just happens by itself, right?
Absolutely.
There you go. So everybody should play Oblivion.
I was going to say what I thought would be good as a kind of wrap up would be to kind of hear what your key takeaways or your key advice would be around understanding the customer and how that can help a company with their product and their website. You also mentioned, understanding the customer, resonance with the customer, all of these things. And yeah, it'd be great to just hear what your thoughts are on how a company can bring all of that together.
Yeah, I think there's probably just a few points to make, really, because this work, it is not complicated. It's the beauty of it. It's not complicated. Compared to what a lot of people have to deal with on the day-to-day, this is really easy. And actually, so that's the first point. Don't be afraid to step away from your data for a day, for a couple of days and months, whatever it might be. Just take a minute away from it, because you get data blindness. Everybody gets it. It's just like, I've been looking at this for so long, it's not telling me anything new. So by going out and doing this kind of stuff that we've been talking about, it gives you a minute to reassess that and think about it in a slightly different way. So that would be step one. Step two, or tip two, would be don't be afraid to come out of your lane, right? If you are a data analyst, don't be afraid to go and do a bit of the user research, right? Because if you haven't got somebody there that's doing it for you, then actually it gives you an opportunity to discover something new and potentially helpful for your users, right? Always, tip number 3, contemplate what happens if you don't have that data to rely on, right? We are in a world where GDPR, data privacy, cookies, all of this is relevant to the work that you're doing. So you are not going to be able to rely on that data. And part of me would hope we get to a point where a user is completely in control of their data that people have about them. I think it's important for many, many reasons. I don't like too many companies having a lot of data about a lot of people. I think that is a dangerous road to go down. So think about it from that point of view. What would happen if you suddenly didn't have that data? How would you do the job that you were doing? How would you mitigate missing that information? And for me at the moment, the only way that I can think that you can do that is by having that base knowledge which you can build on about these users. So even if that data is gone, you know who you're talking to. There you go.
Absolutely brilliant. I think, there's some great takeaways there, and I think stuff that our listeners would find really useful as well.
I hope so.
They were all great topics and great ideas there as well that they can use to combine, obviously, with their existing data and things like that, and then bringing in maybe a slightly new approach and fresh ideas into understanding the customer and, improving.
I've got one more tip for you then, Lloyd. So if you're dealing with data and dealing with people who have to understand data but are not at your level of data, try to story tell your data. Don't just show bar charts, all that kind of usual stuff that we all kind of fall back on as a quick, well, I need to do that report, that will do. If you believe truly that there's a point to the data that you're showing that's very important, then tell a story behind it so people understand the relevance and the impact of the data. Don't just show numbers. Numbers have stories too, but you just need to do a little bit of work to explain it and get people to understand it much better. That would be the final tip.
Absolutely. I think that is one thing that is always always comes up as a requirement, is looking for candidates that are able to tell stories with data. So yeah, spot on. It's always something that the clients are looking for. So for candidates listening, could be a takeaway to definitely be able to tell stories with the data.
Visualizing data in a good way. That always helps.
Absolutely. Well, I think that was really, really helpful. I think very interesting stuff, and a fresh approach, and something slightly a little bit different maybe to what our normal podcasts which are usually obviously very much focused on the data. So I think it's a refreshing and new approach, really.
Well, I'm hoping I've put a fly in your ointment there, Lloyd. Giving people something else to think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I hope it resonates with people. I honestly do, because actually it's quite satisfying just to take a step away from the day-to-day and remember why you're doing the work that you're doing.
Exactly, yeah. And remembering it's the user and the customer that was the core thing initially, wasn't it?
If you haven't got them, you've got nothing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Abi, for taking the time to speak with me and do the podcast. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. And yeah, no problem. And thank you for the listener. Well, thank you to the listeners as well for tuning in. There'll be another podcast with data leaders coming soon. So if you want any more information on Harnham, you can find us at harnham.com. This podcast will be available on Spotify and LinkedIn to like and share. And thanks again for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode, brought to you by the Harnham Group. We'd love it if you would share the podcast on social media and leave a comment or a review to help us reach a bigger audience. If your company is having difficulty finding skilled data professionals, you can rely on the global leader in data and analytics recruitment, staffing and talent development to assist you with your hiring needs. Find out more at www.harnham.com. Thank you for listening.